Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Tales from the Darkness. Gather round and try to stay in the light. Some of the others from the dark aren't quite as civil as I am, and I'd hate to have to clean up the mess. Childhood into Adult Experiences from Rose 12345. This is my first time sharing out in the open what happened to me as a child and later in my life. I'm a 30-year-old female from Connecticut. To start, my single mother bought a Victorian home when I was 7. I'm an only child, and this house was huge for both of us. My mother gave me the master bedroom because she wanted the rest of the house to herself. The humanoid encounter occurred 1 week after we moved in. My mother was dating a truck driver at the time, and we only spent certain days with him. He was there the night of the encounter, but I do not believe he had any involvement. Therapists have told me I may have been sexually abused by him and altered my memory into something paranormal. However, I do not believe this is the case, due to experiences in adulthood. The day of the encounter was like other normal days. At the end of the night, we all went to bed. I was awoken when it was dark out by an extreme need for water. In my life, even to this day, I have never been that thirsty. I remember getting out of bed, walking to my bathroom, and cupping water as fast as I could from the faucet. Something inside of me told me to go check on my mom and her boyfriend. My mother's bedroom was down a long hallway. I remember looking into her room to see her and her boyfriend asleep. Something did not feel right about being in that room, and I heard an inner voice say, "Don't look to the left." I walked backwards out of the room and made my way down the hallway. Suddenly, it was like everything went black around me. I turned around because I could feel something standing behind me. When I looked, there was a very tall, off-white figure. I do not remember the details of its face, but its head was cone-shaped and seemed to scale evenly with its body. The next thing I remember, I was in bed with the covers over my body. I was screaming or crying, and it was instantly morning. When I talked to my mom and her boyfriend about this, they both seemed puzzled. I described its head as if it looked like the figure was wearing a wizard hat. My mom said to me, "So, you're telling me there's a wizard in this house?" And she laughed. I was instantly shut down and felt like if my mom didn't believe me, who would? Shortly after that, I began having vivid dreams about the future and even predicted our house was going to be broken into, oddly enough on Valentine's Day. Flash forward and I'm 24. I was sleeping in a tent in my mother's backyard after I left an apartment in bad taste with my ex and needed a place to stay for a few days. I refused to go inside of that house ever again. I figured sleeping outside would be safer. I was wrong. My mother works nights, so I was alone the entire night. I went to sleep around 10 p.m. and I woke up around 2:30 a.m. I remember being extremely thirsty, and I reached for my bottle of water, chugged it, looked at my phone, and lay back down on the cot I had. I could hear some rumbling outside, but I figured maybe it was just a possum, because we would get those from time to time. Suddenly, there was a bright light coming from the top of the tent. I could feel my body being pulled up off of the cot, and I immediately passed out. When I woke up, it was the afternoon, and I was in the opposite position of how I had laid down lengthwise. I didn't tell my mother about the situation for obvious reasons, but I never spent the night there again. After the last bout of what I consider to be an abduction, I've had numerous reoccurrences of vivid dreams that do come true. In the past, I used heroin as a way to cope with my dreams. I've dreamt of my arrests, my recovery, people who have died in my dreams, and that day found out that they passed away during the night. Most recently, I dreamt a cat died in my arms, and he did, and numerous other accounts. I've also had out-of-body experiences, I'm curious if anyone has had similar experiences after a possible abduction. I will also mention a dream I had about 6 months ago because it pertains to the subject. I dreamt that 2 humanoid small creatures that faded in and out, almost like a hologram, spoke to me while I was standing on a sidewalk. The street looked as if war was breaking out. They kept telling me to hide because other aliens were trying to find children of Earth with special capabilities. I remember a bright light shining over the street and scanning the road. They told me to stay out of the light, otherwise I would be tagged for life. The House at the End of the Road, from Anonymous. Not many people are aware of the road my father lives on. It's tucked away off the highway, and honestly, even I miss it sometimes. At the very end of the road is a small cemetery overlooking the highway. It's cute and quaint. If you happen to venture off a little further down a small gravel road, it leads to a house. This house was once inhabited by an older woman who was always very kind and let us go fishing in her pond. The pond isn't very far from the house, but far enough that she couldn't possibly hear us if we were talking at a normal volume. Honestly, it's a beautiful place, hidden in the woods, away from everyone else. Sadly, old Mrs. Thurman passed away. Upon her death, her family had an estate sale. My best friend's parents, who lived next door to my father, decided to go to the sale with us girls in tow. There weren't many people there, just Miss Thurman's kids and a few neighbors. We walked in the house and it was a grisly sight. Now keep in mind, during this time we were about 8 or 10 years old. The adults didn't seem too concerned about anything, so we kept walking and it got worse. Along the walls looked to be blood splatter, but why would they have an estate sale with so much blood everywhere? I never figured that out. To this day, it still concerns me that maybe sweet old Mrs. Thurman didn't die as quietly as we had thought. About a month or 2 later, after I had forgotten about the whole ordeal, I went fishing with my brother, who was about 14 at the time. My father was tasked with taking care of the grounds of the old Thurman house, as it hadn't sold yet, and no one was living there to help maintain it. We rode down to the house with him, got our gear together, and took off towards the pond. After my father had finished mowing, he went back home. We promised we would be back around dark. With dusk setting in, we decided it was probably a good idea to head home. I looked up towards the house and froze. There was a huge window facing the pond, with a rocking chair where Miss Thurman would always sit and watch the water. Looking at that window, I saw a human figure sitting in the chair. There was a lamp on next to the chair, so all I could see was a silhouette. The figure turned like it was looking at us, stood slowly, and then suddenly there was nothing. The light had turned out. At this point, my brother grabbed my arm and we ran. Our house was under a mile away. We made it home in record time and didn't stop until we made it in the door. To this day, I have never been back to Mrs. Thurman's house, but my best friend and I would occasionally visit her grave. I'm still not sure what or who was in the house that night, but it was not the sweet old lady that I had grown to love. It was something completely opposite. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. If you would like to make a suggestion for future videos, you can do so in the comments down below. If you would like to have your story narrated, you can send it to storiesofdarkness55@gmail.com. And as always, pleasant dreams.